Okay, so here we go for the final power rankings of the 2023 season of fall 2023, however you want to think about it. In some ways, there aren't too many big moves since the last time we talked about this. In other ways, some interesting things have happened. So, things we want to look at heading into this. We obviously have Homecoming. Homecoming is looking a little bit stale at this point, but it is the single most competitive, biggest event that happened. So, this is still going to factor in for sure. The whole season is going to factor in. We also had the Kentucky LAN, biggest LAN of the fall. We covered that a little bit in the last one as well, but things that are a little bit more interesting is NECC has wrapped up their playoffs and NACE has wrapped up their playoffs as well. So what happened that's important here? Well, first off, we got to see St. Clair, after taking down Northeastern, went on to win a close bout against Boise State, who would have previously been considered the number 4 or number 5 team, whereas St. Clair probably would have been down in, I don't know, like 9 to 12 range. And then they did it again a week later. These weren't back to back matches. These matches were spaced out a little bit, so St. Clair had to do it. Fisher had warning that, hey, St. Clair's real. They just took down Boise, another team of Fisher men. This is Fisher men, for those that aren't aware. Fisher has at least 5 teams that they field there. Fisher Wisp would be their top 3 team. Fisher men is, usually been believed to be a top 5 or 6 team. And so those things happened, but then St. Clair did ultimately fall to Maryville in decisive manner. Now, was this so decisive because Maryville woke up after things got way too close against the Bobcats, who came up from the other side of the bracket and went 3-2 against them? We don't know. But the Bobcats did sort of defend their turf. We can see from the Bobcats, they actually they had a very nice season, if I do say so myself. So we look at the Bobcats, we see they got the number 1 seed in Swiss. Obviously, there was some craziness in the Swiss with Boise winning through a Maryville forfeit, if memory serves, but then losing another match and all those things, whatever. So no one really had a perfect record, but Bryant Stratton found themselves a path to the top 6, and then the top 8, and then top 6 here before going out. So good on them there. In NECC, they got into playoffs and beat UTD. Did ultimately lose to Northwood, and in NACE, they once again made it to top 4. Again, none of these are quite as competitive as ABC is, but they also made it to the semis here, and they had to once again beat UTD to do it. So NACE and NECC, they beat UTD, and in ABC, they beat Michigan State, which is kind of a freebie, and then UCI's club team, which is a little bit more. So they perhaps earned that, even if they didn't get to take on a Fisherman or a Boise or even a Rutgers, though that's perhaps where we get to something interesting. Why have Rutgers fallen from this tier? This tier, if we look at, earlier in the season, it would have been this team, and this team that mostly made up the upper portion of this tier. So what changed? Well, Rutgers took a loss to ASU. And Rutgers really hasn't had any great wins this season. Rutgers has kind of been one of the bigger disappointments of this season, I'd say. They obviously added talent to their roster. We can take a quick look over there and sort of see, hey, what do you mean they added talent? Well, this is what their talent looks like. They've got Tap, who, was there last season. They've got Neutral, who was there last season and the previous season, but they've continued to sort of build that out there. Did they have a change there, or did they just have a rename? Um, So yeah, that's the sort of thing where they added Aiko. That's who they had added there. They added Aiko, and everyone expected them to be even better, and they didn't really perform there. So that was kind of weird. Didn't really perform this season. Maybe they'll figure it back out for next season. But they fell down to here in this mid-cluster tier from this upper cluster. And again, last season, by the end of last season, Rutgers was definitively the number 4 team, like by themselves in a half tier between the Kings and everyone else. The only team below that could really challenge the Kings. Not the case this year. Why Mary over you? So now we'll get to this. I'd sort of been talking about these results and what happened. That's Neb who's asking, who is with Fisher Wisp there. And what we get into here is we have a really complicated situation where we look at ABC, and ABC is, of course, the biggest, most prestigious, and Northwood won that, and Fisher Wisp got second. And hey, that's good on them. Good for Northwood. Fisher Wisp beat Maryville there. That's clean. That's solid. We like that. Fine. Most prestigious tournament, most prestigious thing. But then we look at the more recent matches, and we look over at University of Kentucky. That was on LAN, and we've got Maryville beating Fisher. In fact, they did it twice. Okay, yeah, that's more recent, but the bigger tournament was ABC here, and Northwood wasn't in this. Okay, so we have another data point here. Well, what else has happened? Do we have any data from here? No, we don't have any data from NACE, but from NECC Legends Division, what do we have that happened? Well, here we get something interesting where Northwood just decided to flunk out. Northwood just sort of went, we lost to Maryville. I guess now we're done. And then they lost to Bobcats. I'm sorry. I don't actually think then they beat Bobcats. They then lost out to Fishermen. So Fisher's second team there. Do we actually think that Fishermen is better than a Northwood that wants to go full throttle? I don't particularly think that. In fact, I still don't really think Maryville is better than a Fisherman that wants to go full throttle. But I just can't do it. If they're going to lose out twice and get lost, and their last win was a while ago, and they haven't been competing in much before that, we're going to leave them in this king tier. I'm not going to put Fishermen ahead of them, but I am going to put Northwood at the bottom of this group. So then it becomes a question of, well, who do we go with here? Well, Fisher Wisp had the better placement at ABC, but ultimately Northwood won that. Maryville beat them at LAN, beat them at the Kentucky LAN, and they had to do it twice. Hey, that's pretty darn cool. That's a good sign on their part. But then Fisher Wisp has the most recent win, right? Yeah, Fisher Wisp does have the most recent win here. They went ahead and won in the grand finals after a bracket reset. So they actually split here, and Fisher Wisp got the most recent win, no question. But if we go back to sort of go, okay, who do I expect to win on any given day? I've now got another win over here for Maryville, another win over here for Fisher Wisp. This first win is looking pretty stale at this point. Even though Fisher Wisp has the most recent win, and I do like to heavily lean on most recent win, I am going to come down from Maryville here. When we look at like the total number of matchups that they've done over the last 6 weeks or so, it does look like, hey, on any given day, you sort of expect that to win. Could that be wrong? Could it be Fish Wisp has Maryville 100% solved and would now infinitely reproduce and win every time? It absolutely could be, but this was a messy king tier. This was absolutely a messy king tier, not the least of which because if Northwood actually looked serious, it does still look to me, and I could be wrong, like they could just still win. And they have the roster to do it. Will they have the roster to do it as soon as the semester ends? Probably not, based on what we're seeing on the rumors, based on what's happening with who's going where, etc. But looking at this, that's why I chose to put them in this order. Yeah, I saw NECC last week. Aiden, how you doing? Can't even be mad about your drop in ranking because we just stopped scrimming after homecoming and shouldn't have done any CC with our busy schedule. I get it. I get it, man. It happens. Neb says all 3 losses were on one patch. We won on 2 different patches. The patch they won was Doom Patch. Okay. Um. Yeah, that's fine. But you say that. Were these that far spread out? This was November 30th and December 7th. I guess those were a different patch. So yeah, maybe Fisher Wisp has the win on this most recent patch. But I do look at, the total number of matchups here where Fisher Wisp, was able to get it sort of with the bracket reset there, etc. Okay. Some would say, okay, if this happens, it should be a case of now, one more match should still actually be played, and Maryville should get another shot at it. I know we don't do that because it kills too much hype. Even a single bracket reset kills too much hype. But, that little bit, terms of what happened there. And again, Kentucky did happen, and Kentucky, Maryville did win twice at Kentucky to do that. So I'm okay with this. No one questions that this is a what do you do with this tier? There's a reason there's a question mark right here, and it's a tough call. But looking at sort of the totality there, this, the entirety of the season, the end of the season, who do I expect to win on any given day? Well, now that Northwood is phoning it in, I would lean, maybe 55-45, maybe 52-48 towards Maryville there. Maybe that's wrong, but that's where I'd lean based on what I saw there. Yes, I know we're on a, different patch there. Okay. And then we get into the upper cluster in terms of who's doing well of these. I think we talked through St. Clair's meteoric rise, what happened there. St. Clair did well early in the season, sort of fell in the middle of the season. Everyone thought they were done. They weren't actually that real, that they were overhyped by beating UCI's A team, and that, maybe they weren't actually that good. But then they clearly turned that around and went, no, they are actually that good, and they are to be considered one of the teams really, really just outside the top three here. And we see that again with, yes, they fell towards the very end of ABC here, but we can see in NACE, they beat Boise and they beat Fishermen, and those two teams are unquestionably teams that you put in this tier and have been in this tier all season. Fishermen, having just taken down Northwood, and at the very beginning of the season getting a very close match against Northwood. Not that close matches necessarily matter. Bryant Stratton, little less proven to get up here, but they, found their way to almost the end of multiple brackets. In multiple different leagues, they found their way almost to the end. Both times they did it by beating UTD, and UTD did beat UST, and UST did beat, I believe UST beat ASU. Maybe they beat Illinois Orange. Regardless, whichever you're looking at there, they found their way up here. Are they over here? Are they over here? Are they over here? We don't really know, but that's where they are. Fishermen and Boise, those sort of explained for themselves. They've been up here all season. The only things that changed is St. Clair did, yes, beat Fishermen and Boise, and Fishermen got the win over Northwood there. Nothing too crazy in terms of how we're putting these in order here. Boise, maybe Boise feels cheated. Maybe Boise feels like they're better than Bryant Stratton. Can't do anything about it. They lost to St. Clair. Yes, I know Bryant Stratton didn't have the same opponents, but this is, hey, Bryant Stratton got deep to Final Four, etc. in their brackets there. This is UC Irvine's B team. Do I actually think they'd perform this well if they played a match right now? I'd guess they're not even scrimming. At this point, I don't think many teams are scrimming at all. I can see in the servers, in fact, that most teams aren't looking. It's possible they're continuing scrims with their active, pre-scheduled scrim partners. But this was UC Irvine's B team. They haven't competed in anything since ABC, so it's really hard to justify them really falling down. And in ABC, we, of course, know how they did, which is they got their way through here to the round of 8. Lost out to Rutgers, who, now are worse than we thought, so maybe they should fall off of that. But it's a little hard to knock them down all the way to where Rutgers went, especially when they played Bryant Stratton reasonably close, and we see Bryant Stratton has continuously made it through there. So this is what I've gone with here. UTD for a while looked like they might be more towards the lower or middle end of this, but did ultimately prove themselves, did establish. Yes, Bryant Stratton blocked them a couple times, but we can see over at Kentucky, they both beat St. Thomas right here in the lower bracket, and they also beat St. Thomas, I believe, in the qualifiers. I believe we have a head-to-head between them. They lost to Fishermen there, but they did, in fact, beat St. Thomas, Mizzou, Grandview, Ball State, Cincinnati, and MSU, which are all teams that have some degree of recognition. You're going to take back top upper cluster? Don't worry. I look forward to it. I look forward to seeing what you guys can do. Bring it back. And, don't make BSC look bad, sort of thing. I'm kidding. So UTD got a couple good wins over UST there to prove that they belong. don't have too much other than that recently in terms of wins over the others, but don't really need them either. UST, for most of the season, I was a little bit of a UST doubter. I sort of looked at it and went, they're not beating teams. Like their best win was over Converse, sort of thing. But they did continue on through. I believe got a win over ASU there. Can't really be upset with that. Fine, they'll get to go here, and they did, as we see, make their way through respectable teams as we look at St. Thomas, they did lose to UCI there, sure, but even if we go back and look at Kentucky and how they did, we can see beat Grandview, or excuse me, lost to Grandview, which would be another one of those things that had me on notice of are they real sort of thing. Beat Ball State, beat Miami, Ohio, beat Bellevue, beat Georgia Tech, lost to Fisherman and UTD. Can't really blame those. And then in the actual playoffs here, we can see that took out Illinois Wesley, lost to Fisherman, as expected, beat Texas A&M, righted the ship and beat Grandview there. I believe Grandview had kicked a player from their roster at that point, so maybe they're a little weaker, though their coach tells me that that player already wasn't playing, so maybe they're not weaker. I don't know. I'm a little hesitant to believe that they weren't weaker because we saw Grandview lost to Georgia Tech here, and I think those are similar caliber teams, but I think having played both of them quite a bit, that Grandview was at that point in time, to me, seemed like should have been the winner, etc., and it should have been a 2-1 or a 2-0 in their favor. So I don't know, whatever. Doesn't matter. We see St. Thomas found their way through some top 25 schools here, perhaps teams that are either top 20 or right on the border of top 20 here, and took the losses that we expect, and then have the ASU win. Illinois Orange battled out, tough 3-2 win against ASU as well. We sort of see where we're going with this. ASU, it's fine. They're still a good team. We know that. They beat Rutgers, in case we forgot. We're told that Rutgers will be better, that they'll get back in shape, guys. I look forward to it. Cincinnati would be in my do something tier. The only school that's not on here that should be on here because I don't have an icon for them is I'd probably put MSU at the very end of this tier, and I'd put Mizzou in the front half of this tier. If I had to place Mizzou exactly, I'm actually not opposed to placing them like here, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. And then MSU. But yes, if you have specific schools you want to ask about, there's some I haven't filled in. There are none above this line that I haven't filled in, and the ones that I'm exceptionally aware that I would like to have icons for and don't, because I don't have control over this one. This template was built by Lion. I had one on the other site and it won't let me log in. But I would like one for Mizzou, and they would be in here, and then MSU would be probably here-ish. But that's our upper cluster. We did upper cluster. We're towards the end of middle cluster here. Converse didn't finish particularly strong. They've had, win against St. Thomas throughout the season, win and lost to Ball State throughout the season. This is where Converse belongs. They're a mid-cluster team. They can actually get wins against teams in here, but they're going to win a little less often than they're going to lose in this tier. Okay, so they're going to be towards the bottom of this tier. Fisher Navy, didn't see them accomplish too much this season. Yeah, they shut down Ohio State early, if memory serves. I could be misremembering that one. They handled a couple things. They denied Iowa, and really denying Iowa promotion is sort of the thing that has kept them in this tier. Didn't really see them do too much in terms of beating the teams in this tier, but they denied promotion to Iowa early in the season. We'll go ahead and let that be. Is what it is. Fisher's always a little tricky to track because depending on the league, they've sometimes moved players around. Even in ABC, for the first 2 weeks when you were allowed to move players around, they did a little bit of that. BYU. Which school are you abbreviating there? Yeah. Okay. So we continue through here and we finished off our mid cluster tier. And these are sort of where I would say the good Overwatch is happening. Like, this is good Overwatch. Not to say that I expect a Converse or a Fisher Navy to beat a Maryville or a Fisher Wisp, but this is like, hey, these are our top 15 cutoff. This is like, hey, these teams have shown some ability to trade with each other. If you show me a Converse beating a Boise, I'm going to say good job, Converse. If you show me a Georgia Tech beating a Fishermen, I'm going to go, I don't believe you. Kind of my cutoff for what I mean by that. These teams have shown some ability to trade mostly within the cluster, and that's pretty cool. Then we get to the ones who are looking in, who maybe had some sort of thing, like Grandview had their some sort of thing where early in the season in NECC, they did jump Rutgers before even anyone even knew Grandview had a real team, but they caught a Rutgers that was missing like three of its starters. And then, well, what can they do? Well, maybe they can get a win over here. No, not quite, etc. They got close a few times. But they didn't actually cash in on the wins there the same way that a Converse or an ASU has, where, hey, they got the wins. But they're in this tier. They'd have been more solidly in this tier if they hadn't taken that loss to Georgia Tech. But Georgia Tech beat them over at the exception is Grandview got the win over UST. Obviously, we covered that in Kentucky. Those ones were pretty short matches, I do want to cover. Still absolutely real, but the qualifiers are first to two rather than first to three, which does make them pretty short matches. Still absolutely real, but a little bit more volatile. And more recent is the loss. So we go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. In fact, Grandview is almost in danger of falling out of this, in part based on their loss to Georgia Tech here. But they do have a win against UST there. They do have a win against Bellevue there. They, have enough that you're going to go, okay, they're going to hold on. Cool. So we'll continue through here. I'll catch up on chat in just a minute, guys. Maybe Neb will yell at me some more for not putting Fishermen high enough, Fisher Wisp high enough. Who knows? Who knows? I get it, Neb. You could easily make an argument. Like, it's a strong argument for Fisher Wisp to be the best. I think you're going to see on these Okra ratings that there's probably even still some holdouts that pick Northwood as the top team. That's going to be messy. Yeah. I think I've adequately explained my reason, though, of over multiple matches at multiple tournaments, Maryville got the better more times. Even if, yes, Wisps does have the more recent win. And very good on you guys for getting it. Okay, so then we were started backwards on the half a step out, just outside the top 15 tier. We move on to Iowa, and Iowa doesn't have any new developments to show us. They didn't make it in. What do you want me to say? They didn't make it in. They didn't do any more takedowns that would potentially get them in there. What are you going to do? UCS, but they didn't lose any matches either because they just weren't in enough things. They were playing in their Big Ten League, I want to say, whatever that one was. I haven't been able to track that super closely, but last time I did look into it, they were undefeated. That's not terribly surprising. I think the same was true of Rutgers, though. It's been a week or two since I looked into that one. That's a just established league thing. UCSD did get a 3-2 win over Ball State. That looks to be the biggest thing UCSD has really put up on the board this season. So certainly more disappointing than we've seen from them in some other seasons. They've sort of been the upset king. If you start to doubt them, if you start to go, hey, no, they're not real. Hey, no, you don't need to think about them. They pull upsets on top 15 teams. Didn't give us any of that this season. But they did, what they were able to muster was a win over Ball State there, a 3-2 win when people had kind of, including me, had moved them down to top 25, maybe even lower end of top 25. No, they came in here and got that win against Ball State. And there is some inconsistency in their level of play, no question. You can see it when you scrim them, where one day they're, hey, you guys are pretty good, and the next day you go, okay, what's going on here? But hey, that's just what you deal with. That's just what they deal with, rather. Ball State earlier in the season got a win over Converse. Converse righted that the very next day. They just lost to UCSD. We can again see play that's happened more recently. We can go over to Kentucky. We see what Ball did, and Ball did this without their tank player, where they beat Miami. Good for them. They lost to Maryville. Even with their tank player, that was bound to happen. And then they lost to Grandview here. Would that have happened the same way if they had their tank player? I don't know. So could you say, hey, we actually need to move Grandview up here? You could. I'm really hesitant to do it because I know that this was a case of, or I believe this was a case of Ball didn't have their tank player for that specific day, whereas Grandview lost to Georgia Tech and has the roster that they want to have for what was left in the semester at that point. So maybe that's not fair. Maybe, this should be a case of no, these have to be flipped, etc. But again, there's a world where, oh no, Grandview beat UST, they're up here, and that's just not the case. I just don't think that's the case right now. Um, Northeastern, I'm sorry, this is Scrimbucks. Yeah, Northeastern did go through in NACE to round of 16, just like they made playoffs in ABC. St. Clair took them down, definitely put St. Clair for a moment on the back foot there, but St. Clair obviously did ultimately still take the 3-0 there and go on to beat Boise and Fisher Met. You guys can call this homerism. That's perfectly fine. We absolutely crush these teams. We absolutely crush these teams repeatedly, and I don't mean to be mean. Some of you were in the chat. Some of you may say, no. When you guys put in your subs, we do fine. Okay, sorry. So yeah, I don't know what else to say there. That's mostly been a development over the last month, but it is very much true there. They lost you in comp, though? Okay. Okay. Uh, okay. So we continue on through here, and that doesn't mean I don't love you guys that we've scrimmed against there, but because, there's quite a few in here that we have scrimmed against in the last month, but yeah. Muck is a ranked demon now. Stole your skills. Ooh, good for Muck. Good for Muck. Okay, so looking through here, we covered Grandview. We covered all this. Cincy solos this whole list. Nice, nice. Happy to hear that Cincinnati solos this whole list. Let me just go look at the last thing that I saw Cincinnati compete in. Let me take a quick look here. Cincinnati, I'm pretty sure competed in this, but I don't see them here. Does that mean they lost in qualifiers? Cincinnati. Let's take a look here. University of Cincinnati Red. That's their varsity team. Lost to University of Texas Dallas. Lost to Illinois Wesley. Lost to Ball State. Lost to Columbia International. Lost to Kennesaw. I can't give it to you, man. I can't give it to you. That's sorry. Sorry. Okay. So then we continue through here. Georgia Tech, very good on them to get the win over Grandview. Hey, absolutely, even if Grandview was figuring out what to do with a player gone, or maybe a player they'd already gotten rid of and weren't fielding, I don't know. But Georgia Tech got the win over Grandview in Kentucky. Good on them. Bellevue is in this tier based on roster strength. Bellevue, as I've sort of covered last time, just got absolutely the worst. Like, Bellevue did absolutely nothing this season. On the other hand, if you look at who they ran into, they beat Georgia Tech here, so they beat Georgia Tech, and then who they pulled, the match difficulty that they randomly pulled is insane for their qualifiers. These were seeded 2 at a time, but after going 5-1 with a loss to Fishermen here and a win against Mizzou, and Mizzou's pretty good, guys. Mizzou's a top 25 team. They then pulled UTD and UST. Well, that sucks. At least their next opponents will be easy. And then they pulled Converse and Grandview. I just feel sorry for Bellevue. Bellevue are not as good as they should be, but that's just dirty. what got done to them in terms of the poll there for them to not miss by a little bit, but massively miss in terms of placements for that. UC Irvine's A team. I'm not aware of anything that they've competed in since ABC, so all we can do is sort of leave them where they were. Toronto and UW ultimately blocked out one of them. I think both of them might have gone blocked out by UST. I'd have to double check that, but ultimately didn't make it deep into their playoff runs in NACE. And then IWU hasn't really moved. They, of course, did what they did in we go here. They didn't make ABC, though they started out with a pretty strong record before finding some tougher opponents. They did make it into this, and we can see on their way in, they did have to beat Georgia Tech. They lost to Mizzou. They beat Miami, Ohio. They lost to, how do you guys lose? This ISU wasn't good. I don't know how you guys did that. But earlier in the season, they beat Ball State. I think they've also lost to Ball State. We can see that they had some other okay wins here. I think they went out pretty quickly here. Win over Kennesaw. Good on them to get that, but ultimately lost out to lost out to Converse and St. Thomas. And again, the other school that I would very much put in this tier would be Mizzou, and they might go here. They go right around Georgia Tech. I do see that they beat Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech more recently beat Grandview. What exactly do you want to do with that? I'm going to put Mizzou somewhere right in here. I'm probably going to put them right here, to be perfectly honest. And then we get into the guys who I'm looking to do something. Like, I know my ESC brethren. I want to see you guys do something. Come on, go, do something. MSU is the last one I didn't cover. MSU goes at the very end of our one-step short tier. And why are they here? They haven't really beat anyone. I know. It's infuriating that MSU hasn't really beat anyone because you look at them and they got to the round of 16 in ABC. But if you looked at how easy their bracket was, or their Swiss round was, it was a joke. I'm sorry, but Michigan State's Swiss round was a joke, and their first round in the playoffs, Shenandoah, this was literally the weakest matchup. There was the least total team talent in this match of all of the first round matches. And I'm not being mean there. I really do think that there was the least team capable talent in terms of adding these two team strengths together of any other match in the first round. And then, so, I'm being super critical of Michigan State here. But then if I go over to Kentucky, they did find their way through Swiss. And, if you're going to find your way to top 16 in ABC, and then you're going to go to the biggest LAN of the fall, and you're going to find your way to the LAN stage here, and not with anything amazing. Really, there's no good wins here. There's not. Blinn, Tennessee Tech, Western Kentucky, like South Florida, these aren't good wins. The closest thing to a good win here is Texas A&M Maroon. That's the closest thing to a good win. I can sort of give you a half point for that. But if you find your way through repeatedly, you sort of do get into it's not, there's something there. Like, they're clearly not actually good. Like, they're at the very bottom of this tier, but if you repeatedly sort of chunk through the teams, they're beating who they have to beat. I'll just say that to stay on the edge of relevance. So that's why we're talking about them there. I felt bad for MSU. They looked so crushed after getting first rounded. Yeah. But hey, this is what you need to do. You need to win the matches you're supposed to win to hang with not even the big boys. The big boys are like up here. So we've got the big boys. We've got the boys. We've got the little brothers. I don't know. To hang with the they're on the earth. They've been born. They're hanging out with the babies that have been born. They're not in that pre-existing state. They're getting the wins they need to go, hey, I will find reasonable opponents. And that's what you got to do. You sort of do that, keep hanging with them, find the better matchups, and eventually get through here. And then now for real, we are on to my do something tier, and there are more schools I could put in this do something tier. I could put I could put Penn in the do something tier. That's a Toronto duplicate. I could put Gaming Gators here. I could put Texas A&M here. I could put Longhorn Gaming, Rebel Gaming. There's lots of schools that I could put in the do something tier. Waterloo, sure, that would be another reasonable one. But these are some that I went, yeah, they've done sort of almost done something this season. We got a top 32 finish here. Good for you guys, Ohio. We got a pretty good ABC Swiss finish here. They definitely benefited from how the forfeits happened, etc. I expected to see this team do a little bit more on the radar. It popped up. It seemed like it might be in this tier, maybe in this tier, but it didn't actually put the wins on the board that are making me, fully believe that that's a thing. So I'm looking to see these teams. I know these teams are capable of doing stuff. I just didn't see it this season. And Ohio, bring it. Bring it, Ohio. We'll see you in ESC. You too, Miami, Ohio. Ohio and Miami, Ohio. Repetitive. Okay. That's fake data. Where to Crib University? Okay. Um, I don't know if Akron is good now. I think they're going to be significantly better than last season, but the latest data I would have on them would suggest to me that what we're going to see is instead of them having like two GMs trying to carry three plats or whatever it was last season, which was weird for them. Before last season, they were, full GM team. I think we're going to probably see them be a full GM or at least GM Masters team. I don't think that we're looking at a team that is, a real top three threat, but I think they could be, a much better number five. I don't even think they were the number 5 or 6 team last season. I think they were like 8 in ESC. And I think now they will pretty comfortably make 5, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay. So let me catch up on chat here. If people have stuff that they want to, if people have stuff that they want to get in there, make sure to throw it in there. Temporal, the good Overwatch is happening in an ESC. Come on. There you go, Muck. There you go. There is going to be some good Overwatch in ESC. I look forward to it. And I'm actually glad Akron leveled up for the sake of that because it puts another team in the mix. ESC has a little bit, a lot of leagues have a little bit. The problem that all of these new Legends divisions have been trying to solve is we get to a place where regular season NACE, regular season NECC, regular season ESC, regular season everything tends to kind of be junk matches. You have one, maybe two regular season matches that matter for the, top 20 or so teams. And that leaves you in a place where you then go, okay, well, it takes what would be scrim time to play bad matches. And this is, students suiting up to play after doing classes for a day. It's not just like, oh, this is the only thing I've got to do to all day. No. These students are in classes, potentially working, and this is time that you would prefer if you're going to devote it to Overwatch to devote it to an even level scrim. I don't want to go play a match against a 2.5 team. I would much rather scrim against Georgia Tech or UCSD or Miami, Ohio, or, or Converse or whoever. That's much more interesting than, okay, suit up, be here, check in 10 minutes early, do your match. It took all of half an hour, but now you don't have time to scrim because you're into the scrim block. Or maybe it happened before the scrim block, but you were hesitant to schedule a scrim because if you were wrong about the opponent's difficulty and the match went long, you potentially have your scrim opponent waiting 30 minutes, which isn't good etiquette either, and or is making your players stressed that they're late for a scrim in a game against an opponent that's actually already giving them some difficulty. Low match quality is a bane, and it's why these leagues have been trying to solve that, and I've been really happy that they're trying to solve that. I do think the Legends division is probably a little bit better of an implementation than what we're seeing from NACE. For those that don't know, for NACE, they are doing their version of a Legends division, and it's going to invite the teams that made it to here. And That's okay. That's fine. But Rit didn't even make my do something list. And Oakland, I don't really think is strong enough either. Oakland is where Croy is, but Croy can't carry that whole team by himself. Um, and you might go, oh, but they made it to round of eight, so they must have. Well, not really. Oakland beat Shenandoah to do this, and Rit beat Blinn. And Blinn's coach will tell us that I think that team is like three GMs and two plats this season, something like that. Maybe those plats are diamonds. Maybe I'm mistaken, but it's not a real team of like actual 4-4 or 4-5 players in Overwatch 1 standards. So, yeah. And if you go, okay, well, yeah, but these are the best that they could have done. Not really. We look at this and, just as examples, Akron, I believe, is better than these teams that actually made it through in terms of Rit and Oakland. Akron is probably better. Where is Mizzou is definitely better. Northeastern is definitely better. Like these are all teams that are better than these, and I don't care. Like that's fine. We Northeastern wasn't going to compete in it anyways because we've already got ESC that we'll be competing in, and our school takes that one, more seriously in terms of no, that's our preferred league. We'll do ABC and that. But the point that I'm making here is they're locked into this. They're locked into this based on these results, even if one of these schools loses three of their players. They're locked into this for the entire season, and they don't really have the way to change. Whereas I think, at least this season, NECC just kind of directly invited teams that they wanted for the season. And I know NACE has been good enough in the past at seeding teams that they would be plenty capable of correctly recruiting the teams that they wanted. So I think they'd be better off doing that. But hey, okay. Anything else? Reason for UST being so high, they've had a few good wins, but not sure enough to be over Illinois Orange and Converse. Sure, I will happily pull up some of their game results. We've got a 3-1 win over Washington down here. But the real reason they have it is because I've got a UST 3-0 over ASU. I've got a UST 3-0 over ASU. ASU's got a win over Rutgers. I can't put Converse over ASU. I agree UST is very flexible here. If you told me, no, 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 this is better, I'd say, yeah, that's fine. But UST does have a pretty recent win over ASU there. Now, they do also have an older loss to Grandview. They do have an older loss to Converse, but Converse hasn't shown me anything recently enough for me to elevate them. I think this is a case of USD has gotten, better. I could be reading it wrong, but I think this is a case of that. It could be a case of ASU had a bad day and then exploded back from that with a really good day, but that's my reasoning. That's how I got there. They obviously couldn't be ahead of UTD. UTD denied them twice. Could they flip with Illinois Orange? Sure. But the reality is, this whole area has some movement possibility to it. Maybe not. I mean, I don't know about Rutgers. Rutgers may be able to find their way back here. I would say this whole area is pretty flexible, but ASU lost the most recent heads to heads against both of these teams. So that's kind of what I'm doing. And then Rutgers goes here because of that. Could you go, oh, well, then Converse belongs all the way over here? You potentially could, but I just really haven't seen enough else from Converse to really put me there. I mean, maybe we go down here, but okay, is this a case of, okay, well, what do we do? Those two, Converse, they didn't head off, did they? If Converse beat UST in this, did they? No, they avoided each other. Converse did have the loss to Mizzou there. I remember giving Still Kiwi hell over that. And the loss to Ball State. They then beat Ball State the next day. They beat Bellevue. They lost to Fisherman. Yeah, Converse has been a little too spotty. I mean, I know they immediately righted the ship with the win the next day against Ball State, and I know Mizzou is better than most teams think. Mizzou legit is a top 25 team. In fact, Mizzou, I think if I count to 20, this is 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Mizzou might be 21. Mizzou might be 22. I would literally have them as 21 or 22. Um, they're certainly capable of striking in here. They shouldn't really be able to strike up here, but UST has had vulnerability to down here too, but Converse has had vulnerability to a little bit further down still. Um, yeah. I'd say the two teams, Rutgers obviously shown the most vulnerability in that they had a huge fall, but we've sort of already factored in that move down here. The teams in this tier that have had the most vulnerability have probably been these two. You know, they had weird losses to teams down below, but they've also done things in this tier. So I'm not really in serious danger of moving them down. And at the moment, I do think, it would be more reasonable to believe that one of these teams would beat Converse than beat UST. But we could be wrong. Okay. How are my boys, the Sagehens from Sonoma University of Southern California? They're in my who tier. I can talk about rumors for schools, where they're going, etc. Who's going to be stronger next season if we want. When is Temporal University competing in these tournaments? I'm not. I'm not. We're Temporal University is not. Temporal is not going to go accredit a university. How's that? Ooh, Muck taking the shots at Fisher. Okay. Fresco has. I have it from inside source at Fisher that the Overwatch room in their lab smells bad. Weird. Weird. Okay. Okay. Legends Division is cool, but there are still a few teams just outside of it that permastomp every other team in champ. Yeah, I was disappointed to see when I looked up NECC, I think it was, that Georgia Tech and Mizzou were in different divisions because I just sort of glanced through them, and Mizzou beat Illinois Wesley in a 4-0, but it looks like the first three maps were reasonably close. Georgia Tech got a 4-0 against a Michigan team, not Michigan State University, and it, didn't seem particularly close. But like Georgia Tech versus Mizzou would have been a good match. If those two got to play each other in the regular season, that would be pretty cool, sort of thing. Like you could have had something where you go, okay, there's teams that are in this that if those two weren't in the Legends division, and I think it was totally reasonable that they weren't, that would have been a good match to happen, or at least happen in the playoffs, but I guess that's not what happened. I guess they had split divisions. I'm less familiar with NECC than with NACE and ABC and ESC. You get it. There's a lot of leagues in Overwatch or Kentucky or whatever. I think there's room for some level of things continuing to be interesting in terms of what are we talking about? Oh, Legends division, right? Yeah, yeah. So now we're actually talking NACE. My apologies. Yeah, or no, Legends Division. No, that is NECC. Sorry, I'm mixing it up. Yeah. So, but we'll see some demotions. I imagine from Legends Division. I imagine they will demote probably. What did we see in there? If we look at the results from that season, I imagine we could potentially see a few demotions. And if you saw like, I don't know, Mizzou, Georgia Tech, Grandview, and Fisher Chips, because I think Fisher Chips was in there. If those were all competing in a league below the Legends division, okay, that's three real matches for each of them at least. Those teams should have some ability to mix it up. Might Grandview be better than them if they shape back up? Yeah. Could Mizzou or Georgia Tech come out on top? Yeah. Yeah, they could. Am I perhaps underselling Chips? Could be. And that's great because now we've seen ways that depending on how it's going, any one of those teams could be the most threatening. But hey, we'll see. We will see. And I don't actually know exactly how they're handling demotion. Where's phase two? Not in Collegiate. Actually, phase two, I could say that. Phase two was over at Arcadia. Um, Not really. But phase two, the person who owned the spot for phase two for a while was a player at Harrisburg who is now coordinator over at Arcadia. So he thinks he's got some good guys under him, some upcoming talents. Maybe they'll find their way into this tier or this tier. Um, he thinks he's found some impressive players and has an eye for talent. You were recruited to Maryville on a full ride, going up a tier from this move. Oh, okay. Well, if Cohen's going there, we've got to move Maryville up here. Okay. So what else do we have before I talk about that? Lots of ESC teams got scholarships in the last year, which is great because I would love to see the 5 to 9 range toughen up because the gap between 1 to 4 and 5 to 9 was pretty massive. Like there was a pretty massive gap here last season. So if we can make these teams toughen up, that would make this season a lot more interesting. Any reason why Georgia Tech is that high in their tier after they lost to multiple teams in that tier? Yeah, there is. So I'll go over here, and they do have losses that I don't love. I don't love that Bellevue loss. I don't love that Illinois Wesley loss. Lost to Grandview, lost to this, but Grandview had sort of more firmly established this. Ultimately, we look at this, and Grandview had before this tournament more firmly established themselves as being in this tier, and losing to Georgia Tech there, that's okay, that's that's not a good sign. Or excuse me, that's a good sign for Georgia Tech. That's not a good sign for that. Should this maybe have been a case? I have to read the tea leaves of that. Should I instead read the tea leaves of this happened and what actually happened is more like this? I could, but I can only read the tea leaves one way or another or sort of average them, right? So that's kind of what I have to do. And that's what I did. And you could say, hey, we do see Georgia Tech lost to Illinois Wesley there, for example. Should Illinois Wesley be higher? Maybe, but Illinois Wesley did just lose to Mizzou in a 4-0. And again, those first 3 maps were close, but they did lose to Mizzou. And Georgia Tech did make ABC playoffs, which, hey, good for Georgia Tech. And Illinois Wesley did not. Mizzou did not. And again, ABC playoffs are a little old, a little stale at this point, but they are still the most prestigious thing that happened all season. They're the biggest tournament. So we're factoring in a lot of things, and this is kind of where we came to. Could I move Bellevue down more? Yeah, I could. But how far do I want to move UC Irvine's A team down? Becomes another question entirely. Well, it was embarrassing for them to lose to their B team, but is that death? Should they just be in a black hole because of that? Probably not. UTD or Toronto and University of Washington didn't really do anything in NACE or NECC playoffs, but they got beat by reasonably good schools. That's sort of what we're looking at. Everyone's in class other than Fisher teams. Okay. Okay. IWU, Mizzou. I have Mizzou right here with them. I have Mizzou. I probably have Mizzou right here. I might have Mizzou right here. That I'm pretty comfortable with. Mizzou is better than people realize, and that's not me saying that Mizzou is as good as UTD or anything, but Mizzou is better than people realize. Um, yeah. Scream 4K Ultimate. Oh, we're bringing out the memes. We're bringing out the memes. Okay. So, in terms of things that are potentially happening next season that get a little interesting, there's recruiting happening. There's a school that was previously probably a top 20, top 25 school that is coming back and will, if roster rumors are to be believed, will easily be in this tier, if not at the top of this tier. So that's certainly something to be aware of. Someone might be leaving here. Some ones might be following people leaving here. We'd be shocked if these guys don't bring on a couple more teams of players, but at what level? And ISU should make their move. ISU, remember, in theory, was letting this semester ride, keeping their powder dry, making sure they were flush with cash in order to bring in a team. So for next semester, we should have something that brings in an ISU and perhaps brings in another team that I don't have an icon for and don't want to necessarily spoil. But I expect that this team will be, five big, or maybe it'll be four big. Maybe these guys are going to fall. Maybe they don't have good replacements lined up. I don't know. And maybe we're going to see a tiny bit of bleed here. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. You guys will have to keep your eyes peeled. Obviously, I don't want to burn sources too hard there, so I'm not needing to go into more unless different people spoiled in chat. If different people spoiled in chat, I can potentially say more, but I don't want to burn sources. Thoughts on USC and the Big Ten making their esports conference? I think it's good. I think we would like to see more recognizable schools in esports because the reality is these schools aren't terribly. These, how do I want to say this? Yeah, I'm going to say this. The it is good for esports when you get big name schools in esports. Ohio State having a good Overwatch program, for example, they're not as good this season, but they've been good in the past. That's good because people know who Ohio State is. Like, wait, Ohio State, a sports school, is taking esports seriously? That turns some heads. Irvine and Northeastern are some of the more prestigious academic schools, and they're taking Overwatch reasonably seriously. It's good if we can get more well-known schools to fund varsity programs, take it seriously, have things that they can cross promote with their existing leagues like Big Ten, and maybe even get just little snippets. Yeah, they'll handle it embarrassingly at first, and that won't be good, but it is good for the scene because I can tell you that getting my university, for example, to put more funding into esports, one of the easiest ways to make that happen would be if we got schools like, the Ivy League to go, hey, we're going to put up esports teams. You would have a lot of schools then go, oh, yeah, we're pouring money in. And same thing when you get big sports schools to do it, you get the ones who are trying to chase after them, who are, nipping on their heels to go, we're putting in an esports team. Oh, this is real? That gives your administration, that gives other schools' administrations permission to go, oh, well, someone else is doing it, so I'm not going to look like a fool if I do this. The you never get fired for picking IBM, which I realize is a saying that is too old for most of the people that are watching this. So an equivalent would be, you're never going to get fired for picking Microsoft Outlook as your email provider as opposed to going with the new upstart. Because, okay, everyone knows Microsoft. Everyone knows what it does. That's a good enough standard as business. Yeah, we could go with Google, but you're not going to get fired by picking Microsoft for your company. Good point. What's IBM? Exactly. Exactly. Uh, that was the old saying because they were a behemoth of a tech company back in the day. And if you needed server work done, having them do it was like, okay, well, you'll never get fired for picking them. They're the leader, they're the known name, etc. Better publicity, exactly, exactly. But yeah, it is exciting. I am excited to see what happens next semester. Obviously we're in a place where it's good. How's it going to shake up? What's it going to look like? Is St. Clair going to continue their strong rise, or did that peter out at the end and they're going to fall? Is Fisherman going to consolidate back as the king of the not quite in there tier? Is Fisher Wisp going to go, no, we're dominant? Is the new school that I'm not naming at this moment going to come in and just be the king? Is ISU going to return? Is it going to be Return of the King with ISU? What are we looking at? Is Bryant Stratton going to stay this strong? Boise, even though, we're surely not going to be in a Bastion meta next semester, what are we looking at? Is Irvine going to let their B team continue to be the best, or are they going to go, hey, no, this is real for us, this is what we do, put their pride on the line, and, shoot right back up into here? What are we looking at? What are we looking at? But that's going to do it for now. I hope you guys have enjoyed. For those that want to, I will hop over and probably go stream some trails on Twitch. So Temporal TV on Twitch, probably be up in about 10 minutes. Otherwise, I will see you guys in a bit.